Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Black Mental Health Matters. I'm Dr. Kerry-Ann Williams. I'm a psychiatrist practicing here in Massachusetts, and this is a show that's about everything related to mental wellness in the Black community and beyond. And today is going to be one of those and beyond topics. Um, we've been told that healthy eating helps us both physically and mentally, but which foods should we focus on, and how do they help us? Today, I'm going to be talking with you about nutrition and mental health. We're going to talk about how you can choose certain foods that research has supported to be mental health boosters. And maybe I'll make this topic into a little bit more of a series because there's a lot that I could say about nutrition and food, nutrients for mental health. So let me know if there's a particular food or nutrient that you would like for me to cover in the future. Today, I'm going to start with talking about a supplement that has a lot of research out there to support its use. In particular, it has a lot of physical benefits, but I'm going to focus on the benefits for brain health. The first supplement I'm starting with is omega fatty acids. There's omega 3, 6, and 9. So the most common omega 3s are DHA, ALA, and EPA. Omega 3 fats help to form the membranes that surround each cell in our body. Omega 3 fatty acids have been found to be helpful also for the aging brain. It improves brain function, it improves structural elements of the brain, and even the volume of certain brain areas. DHA in particular plays a role in helping brain cells to grow, helping them to adapt to change, and helping them to survive. It also helps to support communication between the nerve cells, and it supports our memory. Omega 3s have also been shown to help reduce depression. And deficiencies in omega 3s can increase your risk for depression, for bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, dementia, and ADHD. So sometimes for some of these disorders, people will sometimes take omega 3 supplements. So there's omega 3 supplements that people take sometimes for ADHD, for schizophrenia, for depression, and so on. Omega 3s also reduce inflammation in the body in general. And of course, that also means it's helpful for babies. So omega 3s are important for babies. And so if you have enough omega 3s in the diet or being supplied to the baby, it can reduce their risk of having mental health conditions in the future, like ADHD and schizophrenia. Now, the typical American diet is maybe a little bit higher in omega 6s. And so sometimes there's some attention paid to the ratio between omega 6s and omega 3s. Omega 6s tend to provide energy. The most common omega 6 is called linoleic acid. And one type of linoleic acid is found in evening primrose oil. There are also omega 9s, like oleic acid. Omega 9s are not technically considered essential because the body can produce them, but they can help to improve the body's sensitivity to insulin. So that can be helpful in diabetes. So deficiencies in both omega 3s and also vitamin B12 can compromise optimal brain health. So what should you eat if you want to make sure that you have omega 3s in your diet? Well, if you want to get omega 3s consistently, then you should supplement with a fish oil tablet, a fish oil capsule, I should say. That way you're getting consistent intake. Otherwise, you can get this in your diet by consuming fish that are considered oily, like salmon, mackerel, or sardines. Now, when I was younger, I used to eat a lot more mackerel and sardines, but now I'm primarily plant-based. So I actually take a vegan omega 3 supplement that's using algae-based sources of DHA and EPA. And I also get omega 3s from nuts and seeds, like flax seeds, walnuts, and chia seeds. Some sources of omega 6s would be walnuts, cashews, and almonds. Some sources of omega 9s, Same three: walnuts, cashews, and almonds will give you omega-6s and 9s. So omega-3s are essential for your mental health. So pay attention to making sure your diet includes omega-3s. Supplement it if you have to. The second I'm going to talk about is vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is known as cobalamin, and it is made by microbes that live on plant roots. So technically, it's not synthesized by either plants or animals. So what happens is that after B12 is synthesized, it can get transferred into animal tissues. So that's why we tend to say you have to eat meat and dairy to get B12, and that people who don't eat meat are likely to be deficient. So cattle and sheep are a good source of B12 because these animals tend to engage in a process called rumination, and that involves having bacteria present in their stomachs. So they have this kind of symbiotic relationship with the bacteria. So we can get that when we eat those particular animals. You can also get it from certain fish and shellfish because certain types of seaweed have the bacteria that they kind of interact with this bacteria that synthesize B12. But of course, humans then cannot really get B12 just from eating plants directly. At least they can't get enough of B12 from eating plants directly. Why do we even care about B12? B12 is essential for proper brain development. That's why it's crucial for your mental health. It's also said to help with the formation of DNA, but I'm going to focus more on the brain health stuff. It is known to have a fundamental role in brain development at all ages. It helps to prevent problems with our nervous system and with your mood. So people who are deficient in vitamin B12 usually start to show problems with their nerves and muscles. They can get tingling and numbness of their extremities. They can have problems walking, problems with their vision, and memory problems. It's especially important for people who are pregnant, both for them and for their developing baby. And children who are deficient in B12 can be irritable, they can have a low appetite, and they can have some regression in their development. Now, some people have a condition called pernicious anemia, and they have to get vitamin B12 in the form of injections because their bodies don't really absorb B12 very well from ingestion. So when they take it in through food or through supplements, their body just doesn't absorb it through their intestines. So they have to get it through an injection. So some people have that condition, and that's something that your doctor can evaluate and help you treat. Now, some researchers have said that no matter what your diet is, you should be taking a B12 supplementation. And there's a theory that due to farming practices over time, as well as antibiotic use in animals, the levels of B12 that we can obtain through eating meat may actually be going down, or it otherwise might just not be enough. So your best bet, whether you're a meat eater or not, is to supplement vitamin B12. Now, some foods are fortified with vitamin B12. Some certain mushrooms are a natural source of B12, but I think the best recommendation that I would have for you would be to talk to your doctor about whether taking a B12 supplement would be right for you. It's something that can be checked. Your B12 levels can be checked, so you can see whether it is something you need to supplement. So B12 is essential for your mental health. The third thing I want to talk about is vitamin B1. It is called thiamine. Thiamine. And thiamine is necessary for the structure of brain cells. Now, if you're eating a standard American diet, you're probably not going to be deficient in thiamine, okay? But if you have an eating disorder where you're restricting your diet, if you're undernourished, or if you have chronic alcoholism, you are at risk for a thiamine deficiency. People who have chronic alcoholism often have a low intake of thiamine, and they can have a decreased absorption of thiamine and changes in how the cells use thiamine. So they can develop a condition called Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. I guess people who are deficient in thiamine in general, not just alcoholics, but people who are deficient in thiamine can develop Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. And what is Wernicke-Korsakoff? Well, it can look like confusion, difficulty walking, tremoring, and vision changes. Can have low blood pressure, and when it starts to get severe, you start to feel cold, like a hypothermia, and you can even end up in a coma. So these things are really important. They're really essential. It's found in meat. It's found in chicken. If you don't eat meat, it's found in whole grains, whole grain cereals like brown rice. It's found in nuts, dried beans, peas, soybeans. Again, whether you eat meat or not, if you have a standard diet, you will probably not be deficient in thiamine, but it's absolutely essential if you have any kind of condition that would lead to you being undernourished. You may need to supplement this. Thiamine is essential for your mental health. The next is iron. I'm not going to spend too long on iron because everybody knows you need iron. Iron is necessary for the formation of healthy red blood cells. So a deficiency in iron is associated with fatigue, also associated with depression and anxiety, including panic attacks. In children, iron deficiency can increase the risk of having ADHD symptoms, mood disorders, and developmental disorders. And females tend to be more susceptible to iron deficiency, anemia than men. So they often need regular iron supplementation. And of course, pregnant women definitely need iron supplementation. Iron is essential for your mental health. And iron deficiency anemia can easily be diagnosed through a lab test, and it can easily be supplemented, just buying iron supplementation at the store. The next is vitamin D. So vitamin D, when sunlight hits your skin, it activates cholesterol present in the skin, and this sets off a cascade that leads to the synthesis of vitamin D in our bodies. So individuals who have a lot of daily sun exposure or living in sunny climates, they tend to be less likely to have low vitamin D levels. But if you live in an area like I do, in Massachusetts, where there are many, many days where there's not very much sunlight, or if you're mostly indoors, even if there is sun outside, you're kind of inside most of the time, you're probably not synthesizing enough vitamin D from sun exposure alone. So most of us get our vitamin D from supplementation. So some foods are fortified with vitamin D, or you can purchase a vitamin D supplement. Interestingly, certain mushrooms also synthesize vitamin D when exposed to the sun, and so they can also be a source of vitamin D for us. And usually, when that's the case in the supermarket, they'll have a label on it saying that it's a source of vitamin D. But why do we talk about vitamin D so much? Well, vitamin D is essential for brain health, and it stimulates an important antioxidant in the brain. Low vitamin D levels can cause depression. And there are some studies citing that vitamin D can be protective for the brain and reduce the risk of dementia. It can also reduce inflammation in the brain. Vitamin D can play a role in the development of brain cells. So, of course, pregnant people also need to pay attention to this one for their developing babies. People who are deficient in vitamin D, they can feel tired, they can be forgetful, they can have low motivation, can have trouble sleeping, and can also have problems with anxiety. So vitamin D is essential for your mental health. Now, the next one I'm going to talk about is, and you can tell me how you pronounce this. Do you pronounce it turmeric or turmeric? Drop a comment below to let me know if you pronounce this word turmeric or turmeric, because I'm not sure how to pronounce this. I kind of alternate how I pronounce the word. Today I'm going to say turmeric. So when we're talking about turmeric, we're really talking about something called curcumin. And so turmeric is a root. It looks a lot like ginger root, except it has this really deep orange color. In fact, It's a deeply staining orange color. For those of you out there that have handled turmeric before, you've got to be careful because it's very staining. And people use it in cooking. We can buy it at the supermarket and you can use it in cooking. Um, now, turmeric is not a typical ingredient in the standard American diet. However, it can be made into a powder, and that's how most Americans know of it. Turmeric powder is an ingredient in curry powder. Okay, so another reason it's not traditionally part of the standard American diet is because it originates in India and it's more prevalent in Indian cuisine. And it's been introduced to us through curried dishes coming from India. And so it's become more popularized in recent days. You hear more people talking about using turmeric in cooking, but it was not traditionally a part of the American standard diet. It's still something that is kind of a niche ingredient, to be fair. But why do we even care about turmeric or curcumin for our mental health? Curcumin is an antioxidant and it helps to reduce the inflammation of nerve cells in the body. So, some studies indicate that it can help to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease. Curcumin boosts a protein in the brain that is involved with memory and learning. And one small study showed improvements in depression in study participants who took curcumin. So you can get curcumin in, you can get turmeric in your diet, or you can get it from a supplement because they do have supplements for turmeric or curcumin. But before you purchase a supplement, I want you to consider a couple of things. One is that curcumin is not well absorbed in the body. You take it, it kind of gets broken down very quickly. So to boost its absorption, you should have turmeric along with black pepper. Take your turmeric with some black pepper. Black pepper contains something called piperine, and that helps to increase the bioavailability of curcumin. So it's one thing to remember if you're going to take turmeric for mental health, include it or combine it with piperine or black pepper. The second thing, which is really important, is that some sources of turmeric powder have been contaminated with lead in the past. And this is because some suppliers added lead in order to increase the weight of the powdered turmeric to gain more money. And so when this was found, those particular products were recalled. And so, I'm not sure what the status of that is. I did see a news story in from January of this year where some folks in Seattle were using turmeric from Bangalore, India, and it was contaminated with lead. So I would say that if you are taking a turmeric supplement that, like the actual tablets where you're taking a higher percentage of turmeric, you probably should check with a manufacturer to make sure that they are periodically doing testing for lead contamination. Okay, so if you're taking a turmeric supplement, maybe make sure that the manufacturer does testing for lead contamination. The thought is that for people that are just using it in their households, that are just shaking a small amount onto their food, that perhaps those small amounts are probably not going to make a big impact. But I'd say be careful if you're taking the actual supplement, the tablets. And again, I don't know how much of an issue it is now. So if anybody out there that's listening knows whether or not this is still an issue with turmeric being contaminated with lead, please drop a comment, share your knowledge so that we can all benefit from it. A lot of people, because of this, they tend to just buy the turmeric root and just cook with it with the actual whole food versus using the powder. That's probably the safest way. But as I said, it just depends on who the supplier is. It depends on the source of the turmeric. All right, so the last thing I'm going to talk about today are probiotics. Probiotics for our mental health. So probiotics are classically used to improve the health of our gut. But did you know that there's a connection between the gut and the brain? The nervous system in the body is connected to the gut and is also connected to the brain. and they deliver chemical messages back and forth to one another. And the gut produces some of the same chemicals that the brain produces to regulate mood. Okay, both the brain and the gut produce serotonin, dopamine, and a neurotransmitter called GABA. And in fact, the gut produces more serotonin than the brain does. Okay. So when you're stressed and anxious, messages get sent out from the brain that can also affect your gut, leading to things like diarrhea or constipation if you're stressed, and vice versa. If you're having problems with your gut, chemical messages can be sent to the brain, and that can influence your mood as well. The gut naturally contains bacteria, and probiotics are beneficial bacteria. So, some studies have shown that the beneficial bacteria in our gut, what it does is it helps to ferment the fiber in our diets, and it provides nutrients for the cells that line the gut, presumably the same cells that would send and receive chemical messages to and from the brain. So that is kind of that connection. The probiotics keep those cells healthy, and those cells promote messaging between the gut and the brain. So, what are some sources of probiotics? Well, there are probiotic supplements that can be purchased, but there's also fermented foods that you can take, like kimchi, that might be a natural source of probiotics. And probably the most common dietary source of probiotics in the standard American diet is yogurt. Whether you have dairy or non-dairy yogurt, it usually includes probiotics. So that's probably a common source in the American diet. There are also things called prebiotics, and prebiotics are the preferred food sources for the beneficial bacteria. So if you eat certain foods, you boost the beneficial bacteria in your gut because that's their kind of preferred food source. So some of those prebiotic foods that beneficial bacteria really like are things like beans and legumes and oats, bananas, blueberries, garlic, onions, leeks, and you can look up the rest. But it makes me think about maybe part of the reason people have beans and they start to kind of the bacteria in their gut produce a lot of gas. And people say, well, when I eat beans, it makes me so gassy. And part of it is because it is a preferred food for your beneficial bacteria. So when you take beans, your beneficial bacteria are like really happy. They're working really hard. They're producing a lot of gas, and it kind of makes people sometimes feel very bloated. But if you after a while of having beans, your gut kind of gets used to that food source, and you have less problems like that. All right, guys. So that's all I'm covering for today. It's kind of a short show. There's more to say with the connection between food and mental health. So if you have any recommendations for foods that you want me to cover in the future, or nutrients that you want me to cover in the future, just let me know. Put it in the comment section. I can look it up and I can do a part 2 if that's something that you're interested in. And before I go, I also wanted to say a few more things. One is, don't overdo it with the supplements. Sometimes over supplementing can backfire because these things, sometimes in high doses, can cause side effects as well. For example, too much iron can cause constipation. Okay, so do your research, talk to your doctor before starting supplements. That's what I do. The other pattern to note here is that even though a really great diet is really important, there are some things that you are going to need to supplement even if you have a good diet. So regardless of your diet, you're going to need to supplement things like B12 because meat eaters and vegans alike will need to supplement B12. Iron, for a lot of women, even if you're eating a healthy diet, you may need to still supplement with iron. Vitamin D, you're not really going to get that from food. And even if you're living in a sunny place, there are some individuals who naturally have a lower synthesis of vitamin D in their bodies. So they may still need to supplement with vitamin D. Lastly, the nutrients and supplements that I spoke about today, they have benefits beyond just the mental health benefits. But I wanted to focus today primarily on the mental health benefits. So don't come after me if I didn't talk about the immune system benefits and all these other things because I really was just focusing on the benefits for the brain health. So let me know what you think. That's it for today's podcast episode. Join me again next time for Black Mental Health Matters, and have a great week.